Now it's time for our talkSPORT Explainer. This is the part of the show where one of our panellists try and make sense of the business in football. And this time, we're going to look at Barcelona and just how they're able to sign world-class players on money they don't have. Joining me to discuss this is Spanish football expert Terry Gibson. Terry, hello to you. Let's start with Barcelona in the sense of them as a club, because there might be a lot of people thinking, well, how on earth have Barcelona, one of the giants of Spanish football, got themselves into this situation? Could you break down for us broadly how they've got there?
I'll try my best. I think a lot of it stems from the previous regime. Josep Bartomeu was the previous president, and people were unaware at the time of how out of control financially the club was. So when the new president took over, Joan Laporta, he was burdened with a whole feast of financial issues that were pretty scandalous, to be honest. You know, the overspending in terms of transfer fees, the ridiculous salaries that players were being paid. And it even dwarfed Real Madrid, you know, in terms of Real Madrid paid their players pretty well. But Barcelona, the salaries they were paying players was eye-opening. So Joan Laporta has had to embark on a regime where he's having to cut costs. And the problem in Spanish football, I say problem, it's not a problem, it's the law, it's the rules. They have a salary cap issue, which is different to the financial fair play that we've had over the years in terms of the Premier League and European football, European competition. Spain have their own laws in place because they had about 12 years ago, a lot of clubs were coming up with contracts for players. And at the end of one season, there was 180 players and managers that were owed money by those clubs. So clubs were writing checks they couldn't pay. So this is why the new laws were brought into place. And to a degree, it has worked. And we've seen the infrastructure in Spanish football is far better now than what it was. You know, TV money, in the past, it was mainly went to Real Madrid and Barcelona, maybe Atletico Madrid, and the rest of it was sort of 10, 15% that was left was spread out amongst the other 16, 17 clubs. Now, their incomes from TV revenue is similar to the Premier League. So if you're a Getafe, you're getting 60, 70 million, whereas in the past it was 6 or 7 million. So that makes a big difference. It's making the league stronger. But of course, it does have implications for a club like Barcelona that are spending above and beyond what they are able to declare to the Spanish Federation. So therefore, the Spanish Federation then come down on every club, and they've brought a salary cap in place, which is based on your debt, based on your revenue. And that's the salary cap that you are given at the start of the season. I kind of like it because it preempts any trouble during the season. So when the Liga season kicks off, we won't have any fear of any club being deducted points during the season. Everybody knows it's a level playing field. Everybody knows where they started at the beginning of the season. But the implication to that is if you're over the salary cap, you cannot register players to play for Barcelona Football Club until you straighten your finances out. So everybody does know where they stand. So it's been a long-term problem for Barcelona. It's been exasperated by the fact we had COVID. So there was the lack of supporters in the stadium, obviously. And it's the fact now that they're not in the Camp Nou, their stadium. They're in a temporary stadium. They're pulling in crowds of 20, 30,000 as opposed to 80, 90,000. So that's had an impact on their revenue as well. So what we're seeing there is a massive struggle from Barcelona each summer, every January transfer window, because they want to strengthen the team. They want to bring new players in, but it's not easy to move players on when they're on such huge salaries. And it's an ongoing struggle until, thankfully from their perspective, they are due to go back into the Camp Nou in November. It's not going to be capacity. It's not going to be up to 80, 90, 100,000. But it's going to be bigger, and they will be better supported than as opposed to the stadium that they currently find themselves in, which is they're pulling in 30,000. You know, it's not an attractive place to go and watch a game of football for a lot of the Barcelona supporters. So I think things will. There is light at the end of the tunnel, but at the moment it's a constant struggle for Joan Laporta and Deco in particular, who is the sporting director, who's responsible for getting rid of players, moving players on, and trying to bring the right players in. I could be critical of the decisions that he is making. They tend to go just for attacking players and exciting attacking players as opposed to players they need. And that's still a problem for Barcelona.
I want to talk to you about one transfer in particular, because you talked about the salary cap and registering players, and this was a big factor in the transfer of Dani Olmo. He had a fantastic Euros, joined the club, but they couldn't register him. I believe it's resolved now, but could you just explain that situation and how that managed to happen?
Well, again, I was just critical of Deco, the sporting director who's responsible for bringing players in. And if we go back to last January, they didn't need a centre forward, but they spent 40 million euros on Vitor Roque, a teenage striker from Brazil. At that time, Xavi wanted Martin Zubimendi, who's a holding midfield player. They could probably have got him for that price. And now we're seeing them signing Dani Olmo when they have 3 or 4 players in that position that can do a similar job. Now, Dani Olmo is a fantastic player, but he's not a player that they need. So this is where the dilemma is for the club. Stop buying the fancy players that might have a sort of temporarily please the supporters. Buy the players they need at the right prices. And what we've found ourselves in the situation with Dani Olmo, and it's not the first time it's happened with Barcelona, is they can buy the player. Barcelona will always find money, but they can't, within the laws of the game with the Spanish Federation, they can't adhere to those laws. But they can always find money. So they find the money to buy a player, but then found that they can't register him. So Barcelona played 2 games now. Dani Olmo is fit. He's been training. He's not been allowed to play. But they have managed to resolve it with a loophole, which is not a surprise. There are loopholes about, and Barcelona do normally find them. And this loophole is that Andreas Christensen, who's been there a couple of years now, he is registered. He's picked up an Achilles tendon injury, which rules him out until Christmas. So they've been able to manage to convince the Spanish Federation that they can unregister Andreas Christensen. He'll still be paid his salary, but he can't play. Even if he gets fit now, he can't play until January. So they've unregistered Andreas Christensen. They've freed up his salary, which together with Gündoğan leaving, Clement Lenglet leaving, Vitor Roque going on loan to Betis, means that now, finally, they were able to announce that Dani Olmo is registered and can join the squad for the game against Rayo Vallecano.
What happens when Christensen is fit again, though? Surely they'll have to register him again. So how are Barcelona going to get around that? And is this quite bizarre, in your opinion, the way that they are doing these dealings?
It is, but they have to do something. They needed some new players. They're trying to strip their squad. There are players that it came as a surprise that İlkay Gündoğan left so quickly. I mean, I think it's no secret that Frankie de Jong and Robert Lewandowski are massive earners, but they can't move them on because no one's going to be able to afford to pay the salaries they earn at Barcelona. So they're always having to do this at the moment. They're hoping when they get back in the Camp Nou and it's back up to full capacity, then they won't have any of these issues as long as they spend and wisely and they pay sensible salaries as opposed to what we've seen with players in the last, I'd say, 5 years. It's not just a current problem. The high salaries of Neymar and Messi and people like that have been, really, really high. So, and it's not just them, it's other players as well. Players you probably wouldn't expect to be earning such big money have been. So this is how it's going to be until the Camp Nou is up and running and functioning properly. They're going to be having to be doing this in every transfer window. I think Andreas Christensen was one of those players they were looking at possibly selling, but now the injuries occurred. So maybe if he gets fit, then maybe we might be looking at them putting him on the market again in the winter transfer window. So this won't be the last. We've only got a few days left of the transfer window. I wouldn't be surprised to see they're still trying to bring somebody else in. I mean, they've been lucky, they've been blessed. Every cloud has a silver lining because what this issue has brought to a head is them using young footballers. Instead of a whole group, a whole squad of 27, 28, 29, 30-year-olds, established superstars. Because of this situation, they've had to dig deep, go into the academy. And some of the players they're producing are just out of this world. Lamine Yamal is one that obviously everybody knows. He's now 17. Pau Kubasi is 17. Mark Bernal, who's filling in the role, holding midfield player, looks like another Sergio Busquets. He's 17. You know, Pedri, Gavi, Alejandro Balde. They've got 6 or 7 unbelievable, talented young players that may not have got their opportunity if Barcelona was still running amok and spending hundreds of millions of pounds every transfer window. So, you know, Xavi was the first manager to bring them in, and the likes of Gavi and Lamine Yamal. Lamine Yamal was 15 when he made his debut. And now there's a whole group of these young, talented players that pretty much, I have to be honest, are saving Barcelona.
And Terry, I think the thing that people may scratch their heads about at the moment is the fact that the club is nearly 3 billion in debt. And you said earlier that they always find a way to be able to buy players. What are some of those ways? What are some of the more bizarre ways that Barcelona have managed to stump up that money?
Well, people have to understand as well that Barcelona isn't owned by anybody. It's owned by the supporters, so not one person. It's not a club that's owned by wealthy owners. And likewise with Real Madrid, and there's Athletic Bilbao as well. There's, I think, Osasuna. There's a few clubs around in Spain that are still owned by the supporters. So it's hard to generate wealth from outside. It's not allowed. Constitutionally, the supporters won't allow it. So what they've done in the past, they've sold bits of the club off. You know, their TV studios, which was Barcelona TV, was sold to a company, and then it's disappeared. There is no Barcelona TV anymore. So there's been some weird deals. But I understand with, you know, Jean Laporte that they have to do stuff. They couldn't just leave it. I went to a game just coming out of COVID. I went to the Camp Nou to watch Barcelona against Granada. It was restricted in terms of the amount of people were allowed. So it wasn't allowed to be full capacity. But it was pouring down with rain. It was a Monday night game under Ronald Koeman. The team weren't doing well. There was less than 20,000 now. And I was in the stadium that night. It was flooded. It was decrepit. It was one of the worst stadiums I've been in since I was playing, since I played for Wimbledon at Plough Lane. It was on a par with that. And people were wading through water, no roof on the stadium at all. So everybody in there's getting wet. The concourses were flooded. I sat there that night and I thought, this is depressing, this is miserable, I can't see where this club is going to go. And they're somehow managing to raise the finance, because it's not football related, to build the new stadium. And somehow since I went, they've won the league under Xavi. You know, they haven't done particularly well in the Champions League. They'll challenge again this year in the Liga. And they're getting through. And at the same time, building a new stadium. So that saves everything. A new camp now, 80, 90, 100,000, that saves Barcelona.
And just very quickly, I think the club you could compare Barcelona to in the Premier League in terms of the way that they are freely spending money, and sometimes you look at it as a fan and think, well, how on earth are they able to do that? How would you compare the current situations of Barcelona to Chelsea?
Well, I think it's different to Chelsea because Chelsea can, and in the past, particularly Roman Abramovich was in charge, the wealth came from him. So there was a huge debt at Chelsea, but it was Roman Abramovich who financed it. Excuse me. Barcelona can't do that. So in the past, they got away with it, but not now because of the new laws.
Terry, thank you very much indeed for your time. Terry Gibson, Spanish football expert there. And thanks for your time. That was the talkSPORT explainer here on how football works.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.